Guardians of the Galaxy. This one's interesting because it kind of had everything going for it, but for some reason, it didn't hit as big as people expected at launch. I mean, you've got one of the most beloved Marvel teams, a great developer, Eidos Montreal, and a focus on single-player storytelling, which is something a lot of people were craving, but when it dropped, it just didn't make the splash it should have. So, what happened? Well, for one, people were still feeling the aftershocks of Marvel's Avengers. That game didn't really land well with fans, and it made a lot of people skeptical about Guardians. Folks saw another Marvel game and thought, here we go again with another live service mess, even though Guardians of the Galaxy is nothing like that. It's a totally single-player, story-driven experience with zero microtransactions or live service elements, but it got lumped in with Avengers, and that hurt its initial reception. Now let's talk about the controversial stuff. The characters. Some fans were thrown off because the game's versions of Star-Lord, Gamora, and the rest of the crew didn't look or sound like their MCU counterparts. If you're used to Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, or Zoe Saldana as Gamora, it might take you a second to adjust to these new interpretations, but once you do, you realize they're actually great. The writing is sharp, the dialogue is hilarious, and the chemistry between the Guardians is spot on. It feels like you're right there with them, and the banter between the team is one of the best parts of the game. The combat also got mixed reactions. Some people found it a little chaotic at first. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. For some reason, it didn't get the love it deserved when it first came out. I mean, Lara Croft is a gaming icon, and the rebooted trilogy had been going strong, but when Shadow of the Tomb Raider dropped, kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people, but honestly, this game is way better than its reputation suggests. Well, a lot of it came down to timing. Shadow of the Tomb Raider launched during a crowded time, with some big AAA games releasing around the same period, so it got overshadowed. Plus, some critics said it didn't do enough to innovate from the previous two games. People expected something groundbreaking after Rise of the Tomb Raider, but instead, they got a game that felt more like an evolution than a revolution. But here's the thing, what's so bad about sticking to a formula that works? The story, for example, is actually pretty deep. And let's not forget the world building. Shadow of the Tomb Raider has some of the most beautiful environments in the entire series. From dense jungles to hidden tombs. The game is visually stunning. The tombs themselves are more complex and rewarding than before, with some really creative puzzles that feel satisfying to solve. If you love the exploration and puzzle-solving aspects of Tomb Raider, this game nails it. Combat also feels more refined. Sure, it's not the focus as much as it was in the earlier reboot games, but that actually works in the game's favor. Shadow of the Tomb Raider encourages stealth and strategy over pure action, which fits the tone of the game. Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Now, this game was supposed to be a huge hit. It's a Star Wars game after all, and it's a sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, which everyone loved. But for some reason, Jedi Survivor didn't quite hit the same heights, at least not right away. Still, this is a game that's definitely better than its initial reception might suggest. When it launched, the game had a lot of bugs, especially on PC. People were reporting frame rate drops, crashes, and all sorts of technical problems. It was one of those situations where the game itself was great, but the technical hiccups held it back. And, in the world of gaming, nothing kills the hype faster than a buggy launch. But here's the thing, once you look past the technical stuff, which has mostly been patched up now, Jedi Survivor is an awesome game. It takes everything that made Fallen Order great and cranks it up a notch. The combat is even more fluid and fun, with new lightsaber stances that let you really customize how you play. Whether you want to go full-on double-bladed action or switch between blasters and sabers, the game gives you options, and it all feels so good. And the exploration. It's even better this time around. The planets in Jedi Survivor are bigger, more open, and filled with secrets to discover. The Metroidvania-style design is back, so you'll be unlocking new abilities and returning to areas to access previously locked-off sections. Jedi Survivor is a beautiful game. The environments are diverse and visually stunning. You definitely don't want to sleep on this one. Resident Evil 6, probably one of the most controversial entries in the Resident Evil series. When it came out, a lot of longtime fans were really disappointed, and it got a ton of hate for straying too far from the classic survival horror roots. One of the big criticisms was that it tried to do too much. The game had 4 separate campaigns, each with its own tone and gameplay style. You had Leon's campaign, which felt more like the traditional Resident Evil survival horror, But then you had Chris's and Jake's campaigns, which were full-on action shooters. It left some players feeling like the game had an identity crisis. It wasn't sure if it wanted to be horror or action, and that split the fanbase. But here's the thing. Resident Evil 6 isn't a bad game. It's just different. If you go in expecting a pure horror experience, yeah, you might be disappointed. But if you approach it as a crazy, action-packed adventure with some horror elements sprinkled in, there's a lot of fun to be had. The variety in the campaigns means there's something for everyone. And the co-op play was a big highlight for people who like playing with friends. And let's be honest, some of the hate was probably just because it wasn't what fans expected after the success of Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5. Those games were a hard act to follow. And RE6 took some big risks. Sure, not all of them landed, but it also had some really cool moments, epic boss battles, and impressive visuals for its time. Despite all the complaints, Resident Evil 6 still has some great moments. Death Stranding, one of the most divisive games out there. When this game dropped, it was like half the gaming community loved it, and the other half was just like, what is this? It's a Hideo Kojima game, so you know it was going to be unique. But Death Stranding took that to a whole new level. Instead of fast-paced action or combat-heavy gameplay, you're a delivery guy in a post-apocalyptic world. It's a game about walking, hiking, and, yes, carrying boxes. People were super confused by the whole concept, especially because the marketing was so mysterious. The trailers didn't really explain much. And when players realized they'd be spending a lot of time delivering packages across desolate landscapes, some were disappointed. It wasn't the action-packed game people expected from the creator of Metal Gear Solid. But here's where the game shines. Death Stranding isn't trying to be a traditional game. It's about the journey, the connections you make, and the feeling of isolation in a broken world. And if you get into that mindset, the game is really something special. It's strangely relaxing, even though it has some seriously intense moments. The way it handles the idea of connecting players, allowing you to help out others in the world by leaving equipment or building structures, was pretty innovative. It made the world feel shared, even though it's a single-player game. Sure, it's not for everyone. If you're looking for constant action, Death Stranding might not be your cup of tea, but if you're in the mood for something different, something that really takes its time to build atmosphere, it's a game that delivers a unique experience. Nier Automata, one of those games that didn't exactly explode onto the scene when it first launched, but ended up becoming a cult classic. If you've never played it, at first glance it might seem like just another action RPG. But this game much more than that. It's one of those titles that, once you dive in, completely pulls you in with its depth themes and that emotional roller coaster of a story. But here's the thing. When it first came out, not a lot of people were talking about it. Sure, it had fans, but it didn't immediately blow up like some big AAA game. Part of that might be because the original was kind of niche and never really became a mainstream hit. So it had this uphill battle where people weren't sure if it was worth checking out. The game is weird. And I say that in the best possible way. It doesn't hold your hand, it doesn't give you a typical RPG experience, and the story can get really out there. You've got androids questioning the meaning of life, robots acting like humans, existential dread, and more than a few mind-bending plot twists. For some players, it was a little too philosophical. It's not afraid to get deep and ask big questions. And that can be off-putting if you're just looking for a straightforward action game. Then there's the whole multiple endings thing. It doesn't just have a single ending, it has like 26 of them. Now, most of those are joke endings, but to get the full story, you actually have to play through the game multiple times, seeing it from different perspectives. Some people love that. It's one of the game's strengths, but others didn't really want to replay the same sections to uncover the whole narrative. Dying Light 2. Another game that stumbled out of the gate, but is actually pretty awesome when you take a closer look. So, when Dying Light 2 was first announced, people were hyped. The original Dying Light was a sleeper hit, with its intense parkour system and brutal combat, so expectations were sky high for the sequel. But then, delays happened. Lots of them. And with every delay, the excitement started turning into skepticism. When it finally launched in 2022, some people felt like it didn't quite live up to the years of anticipation, and there was plenty of chatter about bugs and performance issues, which, to be fair, did hurt its reputation right out of the gate. But here's the thing. Once you actually dive into Dying Light 2, you realize there's a ton to love about this game. First off, the parkour system is still one of the best in gaming. Running, jumping, and swinging through the city of Villador feels fluid and rewarding. They took what worked in the original and just cranked it up a notch. You really feel like you're flying through this post-apocalyptic world, dodging zombies and hopping between rooftops. The combat? Absolutely brutal. Smacking zombies and bandits with improvised weapons, drop-kicking them off rooftops. It never gets old. Plus, the day-night cycle adds a whole other layer of tension. The zombies are slow and manageable during the day, but at night, man, they become terrifying. It's a heart-pounding experience when you're scrambling to find shelter as the sun goes down and the city gets overrun. Prey. This is one of those games that should have been a hit, but for whatever reason didn't catch on like it deserved to. And honestly, it's a real shame. Now, the controversy with Prey, it starts with the name. A lot of fans of the original Prey from 2006 were upset that Arcane's game had the same title, but was basically a completely different thing. There was no connection to the original Prey, no Tommy, no spirit abilities, none of that. So, right off the bat, some people were mad because they were expecting a sequel or continuation of the original, but Arcane went in a totally different direction. But if you put that aside and judge Prey for what it is, it's actually one of the best immersive sims out there. Arcane is known for crafting amazing worlds. The level design is just insane. You've got all these interconnected areas, and the way you can approach situations, whether you want to sneak, hack, fight, or even turn into a coffee cup. Yeah, that's a thing. Gives you so much freedom. And let's talk about the Typhon, the alien enemies in the game. The mimics are probably the most memorable. These little guys can disguise themselves as everyday objects, so every time you walk into a room, you're second-guessing everything. Is that chair just a chair, or is it about to jump at me? It adds this constant tension that makes the whole experience so gripping. Combat can be pretty tough, but it's rewarding. The glue gun is such a cool weapon. It's not just for fighting, but you can use it to create platforms and block hazards. Middle-earth: Shadow of War. It got a bit of a rough start, but honestly, deserved way more love than it got. Now, when it dropped back in 2017, the game had a lot of expectations riding on it because Shadow of Mordor was such a hit. And Shadow of War did a lot of things right, but there's no denying it also stirred up some serious controversy, which didn't help its case at launch. First, let's get the big elephant in the room out of the way. The microtransactions. Yep, that's where a lot of the initial hate came from. It was a single-player game, but Warner Bros. Thought, hey, let's toss in loot boxes and microtransactions. Gamers were not having it. Understandably, no one wants to feel like they're being nickeled and dimed in a story-driven experience. What's wild, though, is that they eventually removed the microtransactions completely. But by then, the damage had already been done. A lot of people had already written it off. And that's a real shame because, beyond all the controversy, Shadow of War had so much going for it. First off, that Nemesis system, still genius. I mean, creating rivalries with orcs who remember you, plot against you, or come back from the dead for revenge. It's such a unique mechanic that really makes every playthrough different. The world felt alive, chaotic, and personal, in a way most open-world games dream of achieving. Then, there's the scale of the game. They took what worked in Shadow of Mordor and just made it bigger. More fortresses to conquer, more regions to explore, and even more dynamic relationships with your followers and enemies. No Man's Sky, one of the most controversial video game redemption stories out there. When this game first launched, it got slammed hard, like really hard. People were furious because they felt like they were promised the universe, literally, and what they got didn't live up to all the hype. You know how it is when a game gets hyped beyond belief, right? Expectations just go through the roof. The biggest issues at launch were things like missing features, limited multiplayer options, and overall a lack of the promised living, breathing universe that players thought they'd get. It was a huge deal at the time. Everyone was like, where are the massive space battles? Where's all the depth? Players felt misled, and it led to some pretty angry reviews. No Man's Sky became the poster child for overpromised and underdelivered games. But here's the crazy part. Instead of throwing in the towel, the developers at Hello Games just kept working on it. They didn't give up. And over time, they transformed the game into something truly special. Seriously, the updates have been absolutely massive. They kept adding the features players were hoping for, like base building, expanded multiplayer, better exploration mechanics, and more dynamic planets. Now, it's packed with content, and it's a totally different experience from what people saw at launch. It's honestly one of the most positive turnarounds in gaming. It went from being the game everyone loved to hate, to becoming a beloved space exploration game with a really dedicated fanbase.